When we hear the pastor there talk about social services, and this was a facility that helped people with developmental disabilities in San Bernardino, perhaps as many as 300 or 400 people who worked in the facility. And you can see it's a series of buildings. In fact, on the left part of your screen, where you see the glass doors and the palm trees and then the receded roof, we believe that is the facility, the conference area where this took place. And then to the left, screen left, are the larger office complex associated with the Inland Regional Center. And what we're told is that there was a group, perhaps a group associated with this social service organization, that was using the conference room there in the center of your screen. And that is where the shooting took place. At least the shooting began, with reports of at least 20 people shot and police confirming that at least 12 people have been killed. What has made this so anxiety-producing for law enforcement in Southern California, again, are these reports, some from eyewitnesses, but nothing corroborated or confirmed. But a number of eyewitnesses who say it wasn't just one shooter, but they thought they saw as many as 3 with long weapons and wearing body armor. And there was a report, at least from one eyewitness, that prompted police to urge other law enforcement agencies in Southern California to be on the lookout for a black GMC Yukon, a black SUV, which was apparently seen leaving the facility soon after the shooting. So we expect to get an update on that lead in a couple of minutes when the San Bernardino Police Department gives us the latest news. And there you can see the microphones being set up essentially across the street. We also expect an update on the death toll, which currently stands at 12. Also the injury toll, as many as 20 people were shot. There has been reaction from across the United States, from politicians. The White House is monitoring. The governor of California is monitoring. And we're pleased to be joined in studio by Lou Palumbo, retired Nassau County detective. And Lou, a short time ago, you were describing this as particularly unique if, in fact, this would suggest something very different to you than a disgruntled employee, if in fact they are able to confirm that there was more than one person involved in this.
Absolutely. I think what we're looking at is a form of terrorism, whether it's domestic or foreign, and a staged assault. And individuals that obviously conducted what we call advance work or a reconnaissance, making a complete and full assessment of how they would insert themselves into an environment and extract themselves. And then in this instance, it's even lending itself to the possibility that they facilitated a getaway based on the information of a black Suburban.
And by reconnaissance, you're identifying that because of the fact, well, because of the report that this happened at a conference center, that you believe that this was something that might have been scoped out in advance, if indeed this was more than one person involved.
Absolutely. I think without question, if there's more than one shooter involved, there was a lot more work put into this than the random anger or emotionally attached rage that we experience in a conventional shooting that we're experiencing, like Planned Parenthood or the shooting up in Santa Barbara Memorial Day a couple of years ago. This may be a little bit different, but the most important thing at this point is that they try to confirm that, because that's going to take the investigation in a completely different direction, and it will put it right in the hands of the FBI.
And again, those of us in the media, we're essentially trying to play catch up with what police are doing and putting out. We're now about 2.5 hours into when the calls first went to 911. Is it your expectation that by now, 2.5 hours into this, police would have confirmed, at least for themselves, whether or not it was just one shooter or whether there were multiple shooters?
I think the police and law enforcement in general know far more than they're prepared to disseminate to the media or to the public at this point. They don't want to tell more than they need to, because they don't want to arm people who are looking for with information. It's not to educate them. So I do think they have a lot more information involved in this. If you notice, no one's spoken to this incident. It's not likely you'll see the FBI speak to it, because prudently they allow local law enforcement to speak to these incidents, but a lot will come out going forward once they identify the number of shooters. It's going to take this in a completely different direction than the conventional shootings that we're experiencing on a far too regular basis.
Is there a protocol for if, in fact, the police by now have confirmed or suspect that there were multiple shooters? And we are expecting this news conference from the police spokesman in just a few minutes. Is there a protocol for what they would say to the public if, in fact, they believe that the shooters and that there are multiple shooters and that they fled the scene?
The one thing I will tell you is, before they say there's multiple shooters, they're going to know unequivocally that that was the case, because the minute they come out with that statement in a formal capacity, everybody's going to start to speak of terrorism, because that's what this will have to have been. you know, that's not to say that one individual won't commit a terrorist act. Clearly they can. But as a rule, those are normally people, workplace violence, someone didn't receive treatment that they thought they were entitled to. When 2 or more people are involved in these things, these become conspiracies.
Well, I don't want to stop you there because the word terrorism is often thrown around so much in our public discourse. Would you therefore then say that the Columbine shooters were, quote unquote, engaged in terrorism because it was 2 or more? So we're not talking a particular group, we're just talking about a tactic or a strategy.
Absolutely. That was a terrorist incident that they perpetrated in Columbine. I was there, as a matter of fact, the following day with a client of mine who was familiar with the school. And that was a terrorist incident. You know, we want to be real careful today because of political correctness. We don't want to be alarmists. We understand the landscape of America today, the sensitivities and our emotional ability to manage situations and truth. This is going to be whatever it's going to be based on the confirmation of the number of shooters. And it's not going to be simply identifying who one disgruntled person was. The FBI, along with Secret Service and any number of other agencies, including our intelligence community, are going to have to put their brains together to figure out who may have carried this out.
Given that this was not a federal government facility, not a military installation, not a police station, not a school, was not a Planned Parenthood, but it is a facility that is engaged in social services and trying to help people who have developmental disabilities, whether it's education or job training or sex education. Is there anything about that that jumps out to you as a detective that has some significance?
No, and that's something else that's interesting, because the next question that pops up is then why would they focus on this particular facility? There doesn't seem to be anything sexy about it, anything volatile. It doesn't lend itself to being representative of the government, as if you're striking out at the government. What it may be, simply stated, because it was a soft target. And target enriched as well.
Again, we're talking with Lou Palumbo, who's a retired Nassau County detective who's joining us in studio. And as you can see, we do expect, on the left of your screen, you can see some of the reporters and police there. We expect that news conference from the San Bernardino Police Department to begin momentarily. And we would expect, of course, that it's, and of course we can see California State Highway Police are also part of that, local police department, perhaps other federal agency personnel who may be standing by. And as we await for that, and again, we're waiting for confirmation as to whether this is still an active shooting scene at the Inland Regional Center where this began, and also confirmation as to whether police believe this was a case of multiple shooters or just one. As we're waiting for this information, on the phone with us now is J.J. Green. He's Al Jazeera America's national security contributor. J.J., what do you make of this and everything that's happened, given that, as we pointed out, the police are confirming 12 killed. It was not a government facility. It was a social services building. Reports that maybe multiple shooters were involved. What do you make of it all?
3 points, David. Multiple shooters have been confirmed by police out in San Bernardino. Number 2, authorities at DHS have noticed that within the last year there have been active shooters.
JJ, I'm going to have to cut you off for point 3 because we're going to listen to the news conference now, and we'll get your reaction on the other side. Again, this is the news conference in San Bernardino.
With the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Public Affairs Division. I'd just like to provide you with a telephone number in the event that you have information for investigative leads. The number that will be manned by the Sheriff's Department will be 1-866-346-7632. You can also call 1-800-78-CRIME if you wish to remain anonymous. I'll make a couple of quick introductions. We have Chief Jared Berguan from the San Bernardino Police Department standing here to my right, Sheriff John McMahon to my left here, and the Assistant Director in charge of the LA Office of FBI, David Bowditch. Ready. David, with that, I will hand it over to Chief Berguan.
Afternoon, everybody. So this originally started off at 11 o'clock this morning, late this morning, early afternoon. We received a call here at the Inland Regional Center, 1400 block of South Waterman, of a shooting. It was quickly apparent that we had what amounted to an active shooter situation. There was a massive law enforcement response that initially was officers from our department that responded, and then very quickly, as word spread through the region, we had a massive mutual aid response from virtually every law enforcement agency in the immediate area, to include the Sheriff's Department, Colton Police Department, Fontana Police Department, the California Highway Patrol, Probation Department, parole, a number of agencies responded. What we have so far is information that up to 3 people had entered the building and had opened fire on people inside of the building. We do have some preliminary numbers of upwards of 14 people that are dead and upwards of 14 people that are injured. We think those are pretty reliable, but keep in mind those are potentially subject to change. They are preliminary numbers. The 14 that are wounded have been taken to various area hospitals. In addition to the law enforcement response, there was a massive medical aid response from San Diego City Fire Department, other area fire departments, as well as the ambulance, American Medical Response. As officers initially arrived on scene, they went into the active shooter protocols, the things that we trained for. They immediately entered the building in search of the suspects. Initial information is that the suspects were potentially still inside of the building. It is a massive facility, employs several hundred people, and it's taken a long time to clear the building. In fact, I think we still have assets inside that are completing that clearing process. Information that I think is probably the most reliable at this point is that the suspects have fled, potentially in a dark-colored SUV. We do not have any identification on who those suspects are. We do not know what the motive is for the shooting at this point. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the sheriff for a couple of comments.
Thank you, Chief. We're working closely with the San Bernardino Police Department in a unified command, as well as our federal partners, to make sure that we have the resources we need to thoroughly investigate this event. Our officers are working hand in hand with members of the San Bernardino Police Department, as well as the other agencies, to search the building as the Chief indicated. That search is still ongoing. We have also, because of the information that the suspects may have fled the area, we have also shut down and locked down the courts and the local city and county buildings in the general area around San Bernardino. We have an increased law enforcement presence at all the high-profile areas, including hospitals. We've been in contact with the school district and their school police chief to take care of the school side of things. We continue to make sure that we do everything we can to keep the public safe. We've been in contact with the Board of Supervisors. They've pledged their full support and the resources that they have to help solve this as well. We will work together to investigate this case once the scene is secure and work hand in hand with the City of San Bernardino as we do in other high-profile events. I'll now have Dave Bowditch, Assistant Director of the FBI, say a few words.
Thank you, Sheriff. The FBI is here with our state and local partners, as well as our partners from the ATF, and we are here to essentially assure that all the wounded are extracted, and ultimately public safety is the #1 goal at this point. And we will work as a law enforcement community to assure that we have done everything we can in our power to find, locate, and apprehend these subjects. At this point, I know one of your questions is going to be, is this a terrorist incident? I will tell you right now, we do not know if this is a terrorist incident. So we start from the beginning, working with all our local partners. We take the presumption that it may be, it may not be, but we will work hand in hand with them from the beginning. If things change, we are here from the get-go, and there is no steps lost as the investigation proceeds. At this point, I'm going to turn it back over to the Chief.
So very quickly, after the initial response, we have several hundred people that were in the building that are not injured. Those people have been taken to a safe location, and they are part of the investigation. In addition to that, we know that this is a human incident, and this is a tragedy. And we know we've got a lot of folks out there that are very concerned and very worried about their loved ones that may have been at that facility today. We've set up an area at the Hernandez Center at the corner of 3rd and Sierra Way here in the city of San Bernardino for family members to go for information. We will push information out to that for those family members as we can. Also, the Sheriff's Department put out the crime tip hotline number. If anybody has any information, we'd very much like to hear from you. So with that, I will take a couple of questions. Start with Rob.
Do you have any information on this event that was happening? Apparently these upwards of 3 gunmen stormed into.
I don't. I've heard everything, that it was a meeting to a potential like a lunch type gathering, maybe for the holidays. That's not confirmed. That is very preliminary. It's my understanding that most of the people that were wounded, most of the victims, were all centrally located in one area of the facility.
Have any weapons or body armor, anything like that, been recovered?
In terms of the employees, it's my understanding this facility has both state and county employees, as well as folks that work for a number of organizations. The Inland Regional Center serves a number of organizations that treat mental illness type issues and that sort of stuff. I don't have any idea. I know that state and local county employees work there. I do not know if any of them are the victims or who they are at this point.
Do we know if any children are among the victims?
I do not have any information that any children were involved.
Have there been any weapons recovered?
On the weapons used and the number of people involved here, given what you have in the way of evidence, witness accounts, and everything else, would you characterize this as an organized event? What were these men using and shooting at people with?
Preliminary information indicates that these are people that came prepared. That they were dressed and equipped in a way to indicate that they were prepared, and they were armed with long guns, not handguns. I do not know what type of long guns.
How were they dressed?
I don't know.
Have any of those weapons been recovered here at the scene?
We do not have any weapons recovered at this point.
What were they wearing that indicates they were prepared?
Left just a little bit. There's a shadow. Thank you.
Sorry.
Hey, Chief, can I ask for clarification? You said upwards of 14 dead. What does upwards mean, at least?
The preliminary number we have right now is that there are 14 people that are deceased, and our count is another 14 people that have been taken to various hospitals for significant injuries potentially related to gunshots. We also have a number of other people that may have had some minor types of injuries. They fell down in the course of fleeing or something of that nature, but roughly about 14 that we believe are wounded.
Security cameras inside the building where we might give you video evidence of what happened?
I would imagine there are, but we're not that far into the investigation yet.
Chief, we're live on KTLA. Would you mind repeating the nuts and bolts again, if you don't mind? We're live on the air right now.
The whole thing? I think let's take...
Don't worry about
that the building is still being searched. Is there the possibility that there are more deceased or wounded inside of that regional center?
I think that could be a possibility, yes. I don't think we're comfortable saying no at this point.
Have the bomb technicians recovered anything which is or looked like an IED inside the building?
As the teams were going through and searching for the suspects and searching for victims, there were some things in the building that were not immediately identifiable that caused them some concern. As a result of that, we do have some bomb techs that are on site that are checking some of that out. I do not know if they were brought in by the suspects. We do not know if they are bombs of any sort. Just simply things that as our teams were moving through said that needs to be looked at a little bit more closely.
No render safes at this point. They haven't taken anything apart and destroyed anything.
I don't have any information on that.
Have you found any vehicles? Take a step to the left. One step to the left, please. Thank you,
Have you found any vehicles that you believe are related to this event or left anywhere nearby?
Not that I know of at this point.
Have witnesses said the gunman said anything? Did they say anything?
We don't have anything specific from those witnesses. We're in the early stages of talking to them.
Are there any other active scenes at this point?
This is the only active scene that we're working.
What about security tape that may have been shot inside?
That is part of the investigation. I just don't have that at this point.
Can you talk about the suspect's vehicle, that darker SUV? Can you talk about that at all?
That's all we have. Very, very generic. Upwards of 3 suspects. Darker SUV that fled.
Suspects wearing camouflage type of clothes?
I've never heard camouflage.
What were they wearing?
Just to be clear, upwards of 3, does that mean there could be more than 3?
I have repeatedly been told the number is 3, but keep in mind that this is information that is flowing in as people are talking to witnesses very quickly. As we put everything together, some of this may change. We know these are fluid situations, and some of the information we put out now may change a little bit in the future.
Is there any description about these guys? Any description about these suspects?
As far as people in the area, we're doing everything we can to keep this area safe. We are addressing other facilities in the area that we think may be similar or may be similar, but we don't have any information or any credible threats to any other facilities at this point. But obviously we're all on a heightened sense of alert. We would ask the public that they be on a heightened sense of alert, that they're watching out for those things, and if they come across information, contact us and let us investigate it.
Have you any description of the suspects at all, sir?
I put out what I have, just 3. We don't.
Wearing masks, Chief, the gunman.
One report I heard is masks were involved, but I don't know that to be definitive at this point.
Do you have any active leads you're pursuing for them right now?
Yes.
Chief,
Not going to talk about it.
Did the gunman say anything at all during the attack, during the shooting?
Not that I'm aware of.
Any sort of threats made prior to this incident?
I don't. That's part of the investigation. We're not going to talk specifically about that right now.
Hey, Chief, I'm not a media person, but I'm a United States veteran, and I just want to say thank you to the LA agencies, all the chiefs, all the fire chiefs, and everything for your guys' response. I appreciate that.
Thank you very much.
How long did the attack last? Do you have any idea how long it lasted?
A few minutes.
Yes or no?
Based on how well armed you think?
And we got a little interruption there, but the latest news is that the police chief is confirming 14 people, at least 14 people have been killed, 14 injured, and he did say up to 3 shooters. He said their belief is that 3 shooters were involved. He said they came prepared, they were dressed, they had the right equipment. They were using long guns, not handguns, and he said they have reports that they fled in a dark-colored SUV. Let's go back to the rest of the news conference.
Rifles with them. Most of the officers carry handguns. The officers that arrived on scene and did the initial work to go into that building and clear it went in with what the federal prosecution type thing. At this point, we don't know that to be the case, but it's better to have them on scene from the very beginning so they know what we know and they are an active part of the investigation. In addition to that, being from the federal government, they bring to the table tremendous resources to help us in doing our job.
Especially when it comes to terrorism. Can you talk about that?
All right, let's again, the latest information there is that this apparently the shooting lasted just a few minutes, but that here we are 2 hours later, actually nearly 3 hours later, and police are still trying to go room by room and clear the entire facility. The police chief, Chad, said that there were some things that they were investigating that may have been left there, but again, let's pick up with the transmission.
The only thing I'm comforting at this point is that the information we have is that they came prepared to do what they did as if they were on a mission.
How long were they inside shooting?
I don't know specifically. Several minutes.
Were the gunmen still there when the police arrived, when the initial responding officers arrived?
Well, we don't know. We did not. Our police officers have not engaged or exchanged gunfire with anybody, but we don't know if they were on scene when we arrived.
Chief, I don't know if you still covered this or not, but were the vast majority of the dead and wounded in one centralized location within the facility?
Yes, in the same general area of the facility.
Are we making an assumption, and I'm sorry if it's an assumption here, Chief, that they had targeted that particular room, those particular people?
I think we're a little too early in the investigation to even make that assumption. We don't know what the motive is at this point.
Did they take hostages at any time? Were people tied up? Were they held in a room and told, or was it just a shootout?
We don't have any information that they took any hostages.
What kinds of weapons do you use? Could you describe what kinds of weapons they use? Sorry.
Long guns is what I've been told. I think there's people that speculate what type of long guns those are, but I don't want to put out a specific type of gun. I'm just going to say it was a long gun, not a handgun.
What about their behavior made it seem like they were on a mission?
They came in with a purpose. They came in with the intent to do something.
Was there any threat made to this facility prior to this incident?
I don't have specifics on that.
Did anyone recognize?
So with that, we're gonna cut this off. We will be back every hour on the hour to provide an update. Even if we don't have anything specifically, we will come back to you every hour on the hour, at least for the next several hours, to provide an update.
At the top of the hour.
Chief.
At the top of the hour is fine.
Your name, Chief?
Jared Burguan, B-U-R-G-U-A-N.
Chief.
Thank you.
Police chief for San Bernardino, who is confirming that 14 people were killed in this mass shooting, 14 people were injured, and as many as 3 shooters with long guns were involved. According to the police chief, they came prepared, they were dressed, equipped, which we presume to me that they were wearing armor. Again, he said long guns, not handguns. He said that police did not exchange any gunfire with the shooters. In other words, the gunmen fled the scene, they believe, before the police were able to get there. And the police chief described a massive response, both in terms of police and also first responders, emergency vehicles. 14 dead in the shooting. We're joined in studio by Lou Palumbo. He's a retired Nassau County detective. Lou, what'd you make of this?
I thought it was interesting. One thing I was able to note was that no one seemed to ask the law enforcement community if there was any video recovered, which would give us a lot of information. In relationship to the weapons that were used, that's an easy tell. You just pick up shell casings. They have their own forensic fingerprint, which are created by the extractor and the receiver of a firearm, as well as recovering projectiles from a wall.
So they'll know pretty quickly what type of long gun this was.
They should have known the minute they entered the building, and started conducting an investigation, because that's a very key element for law enforcement when they enter a building. We'd like to know what we're up against. So the thing I would immediately do is identify the weapons used, and it's easily done by recovering an empty shell casing.
The other question that has now been answered, and that is, this is now a very different mass shooting than any others in recent history in the United States, because you have perhaps 3 shooters, not just 1, not just 2, as many as 3. They fled. They have not been apprehended. There's no real information about them other than that they may have fled in a black SUV. How does that change what is going on now in law enforcement across Southern California?
This is being treated as a terrorist incident.
Even if he wants to say this wasn't terrorist per se in the traditional sense, but as you pointed out, a staged assault.
It's a planned, staged assault. This is a form of terrorism, whether it's domestic or foreign. That will be the fruition of the investigation, but they can semantically waltz around this all they like. This type of activity, when it's conducted with numerous individuals, is an assault, and it's a terrorist incident. I know it's a very sensitive topic. I know it's a word that alarms the public, but I think the public needs to understand the environment in which we live. And now they have to trust our law enforcement community and our intelligence community to bring this problem to resolution through identifying them and apprehending them.
Police said that they do not have a motive, so there's no indication whether this was just trying to frighten people by taking out a soft target, or whether these shooters may have had some information about this facility or an axe to grind, or whether this was part of some sort of drug settling scores by killing a bunch of people. They have essentially, we don't know, they're not saying, but do you have a sense based on where this happened, the number of people killed, what it is that law enforcement is looking at right now?
I think they're looking at a spectrum of potential scenarios, and you touched on a couple of them. Were there people involved in this facility that were involved in the drug trade or drug trafficking, for example? They're going to have to find that out. Was this simply the byproduct of this target being soft? Was it the byproduct of an element or a cell, for example? And it doesn't have to be a foreign cell. We have a lot of activity going on in this country that people are unaware of, that is domestically driven. The FBI watches them as well. They're trying to determine what the motive is. If we can figure out what the motive is, then we can start to put the pieces together as to who may have carried this out. We're used to a conventional resolution to this. Someone's emotionally attached to it. They hang out. They either end up dead or apprehended, as we just experienced in the most recent incident. In this instance, they planned on fleeing, you know, and they were successful apparently in doing so.
And given that they fled, this will bring to mind what happened perhaps in the Boston Marathon bombings, where several towns went essentially on lockdown as police were trying to develop information about this. Can we expect that that is perhaps what may play out over the next 24 or 48 hours in Southern California as police develop information, try to track what the motive might have been, perhaps pick up some information on the SUV and try to figure out who was involved?
Yeah, the one thing I want to say is, in reference to the FBI, they're some of the finest investigators on the planet. They have forensic units. They're phenomenal investigators. That's what I want to say about them. And they also have confidential informants. They have a budget to pay them. So they're already out there in the field connecting some dots. They're hitting people that are their snitches, or as we call them, confidential informants, to gather information. I think that they are going to find out who this is sooner than most people anticipate. It's a really interesting dynamic, how small the law enforcement community really is. There's only 800,000 of us in the country. People think there's millions of us. And the same thing applies to people that carry out acts like this. They had to go somewhere and interface with people to buy weapons, to buy camouflage gear or flak vests or balaclavas, hoods, whatever it was. They had to interact with people to acquire this. They're going to feed information. It's going to come into them through a number of different avenues, as well as technology. If they were carrying phones, and I'm really reluctant to speak about this because it's one of the tools that law enforcement uses to locate people in a proximity of a crime. We ping your phones. Right. You see, so there's a lot of technology, there's a lot of avenues to go down. The big one is the human resource. They're going to hit the street, they're going to hit everybody that they have on the hook to them, every informant, and they're going to shake this out.
Lou Palumbo is a retired Nassau County Police detective. He's staying with us in studio, but joining us on the phone now